Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today, and rather at the time of the recording, it's safe to say we are into October. Fall is upon us, so I thought it'd be fun to put together a themed video, and to that end, today we're going to be looking at 5 orange comic book collected editions. That's right, my unifying idea for today's prompt is simply the colors, in most cases, of the spines of these books. These are all orangish in hue, and so I thought I'd put it together because when I think of orange, I think of all things fall, autumnal. Anyway, I'm excited to get things started. Before we do though, I want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can actually find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything on their site you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's probably one of the best ways to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First up on today's list, we're going to be talking about Origin, also known as Wolverine Origin, which is a 6-issue limited series from Marvel Comics written by Bill Jenkins, Joe Quesada, and Paul Jenkins, with art from Andy Kubert and Richard Eisenow for color. This is a really fun book, and with that kind of orangey brown sunburst color we have on the spine, I thought it would be perfect for today's list. For those that don't know, Wolverine is easily one of my favorite Marvel comic book characters, in the top 5 to be certain, and when I think about Wolverine, I think about this book, honestly. This was one of my first introductions to the character, perhaps not my first Wolverine appearance I ever read in comic books, but definitely one of the earlier trade paperback collections I ever managed to pick up. Origin is, as it sounds, an origin story for our very own Wolverine. Long before he's ever called Wolverine, long before he ever has his adamantium bonded to his skeleton. For that story, highly recommend reading Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X. At any rate, though, this is when he was just a child. This is part of his memory he has forgotten. This is his early childhood, the first manifestations of his mutant gifts, including those bone claws, and some deep tragedy with this character. I'll be honest, I've heard mixed reviews about this storyline over the years, but I personally have always enjoyed it. And while I don't believe I've given it a full review on the channel, though if that's something you'd be interested in, definitely let me know in the comments. But yeah, I've always really liked this book. Again, I don't know if it's the strongest Wolverine story we've ever gotten. I know some people prefer Weapon X as a kind of definitive origin story, thinking that that's where Wolverine actually gets his start, rather than the boy Logan, or James, depending on how you like to call him. But I do think that this was a fun piece of the puzzle, the mosaic that makes up the Wolverine, his psyche, everything involved. Do I think it's the sharpest comic book origin story we've ever received? I don't know, but again, I've always been a fan of it. I think the art is pretty brilliant throughout as well. I know sometimes it can look a little bit rounded or kind of too animated, but I do think some of the visuals are just striking. The storytelling is also really immersive, and because of how old Logan is, it does feel like almost a period piece in some ways. I like that we get to see some of his character bits emerging, even in early childhood, even with a lot of these events not in his memory. I do really like it. I really like that Marvel put together this miniseries, and I think if you are a fan of Wolverine and you haven't given Origin a read, it might be worth doing so. And maybe if you didn't think favorably of Origin, maybe it might be worth reevaluating. It is just such an interesting piece of, again, that Wolverine puzzle. And I, for one, thought it was kind of a blast. And hey, for the purposes today, the spine was orangish. Next up on our list today is Inferno by Jonathan Hickman from Marvel Comics. This is, I believe, a 4-issue miniseries. I have it here in an oversized hardcover format. We have that kind of electric neon orange on the spine. Definitely jumped off my bookcase and thought it was a must-get for this video. For those that don't know, I am a Jonathan Hickman fan, and I, for one, really enjoyed the Krakoa era for X-Men and all the other adjacent X titles that began after the events of House House of X Powers of 10. They did finish that era of X-Men recently. I'm still making my way through some of the latter Krakoa era, but I, for one, like I said, just really enjoyed the ride the last couple years, and this was a really pivotal key moment in that Krakoa story arc. This is also the last of Hickman's input on this whole era, I believe. After he wrote House of X Powers of 10, that initial X-Men run, he wrote some of X of Swords. I think he might have even written New Mutants, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, this was kind of his end of this Krakoa era, unless he came back, but again, I haven't heard that, so as far as I know, this is it here. But this is a really fun miniseries. Like I said, at 4 issues, we actually cover quite a lot of ground. I don't want to spoil too much, but suffice it to say, within the Krakoa era, and again, I mentioned that a few times, if you don't know what that means, essentially it was a period of time within the Marvel Universe for the X-Men and really all the mutant characters where the mutants had their own nation state. They became kind of a world and sort of galactic superpower for a time. There was a lot of fun and fascinating wrinkles in this time and how mutants were able to survive and be a part of this. I won't spoil that much here, but again, this is during that period of time where we have all of these mutants and returning mutants all back together on this island nation. And while in some ways this is utopian or idyllic, there's a lot of conspiracy and a lot of really intense stuff in the foundation of this nation, and most of that is known primarily by Charles Xavier and Magneto and Moira McTaggart. Anyway, this story brings some of that to a head, and it heavily involves the characters of Mystique and Destiny, so if those are mutant characters you've ever really enjoyed, this is a pretty landmark little miniseries for those characters. And like I said, if you're trying to read kind of an essentials for the Krakoa era, I certainly think that this miniseries should be near the top of that list. In fact, I think it was one of the most important main little events that happened in about the midpoint of the Krakoa era. But yeah, really good stuff here. We have some wonderful art all the way through. I also love the colors. I think it just pops. It's really visual and interesting. And at 4 issues, it is just loaded with action, exposition, and a really good feeling that we're kind of moving forward. I do recommend reading at least House of X Powers of 10 before picking this book up. I think reading some of the X-Men run as well from Hickman might be beneficial. But yeah, this book is an essential, and this book is just such a fun read. I do highly recommend it to those interested in the X-Men franchise. Next up on our orange list here, we have Batman, Their Dark Designs by James Tynion IV and Guillem March. This is the beginning of James Tynion's run on the Batman title. This is not to be confused with his time on Detective Comics during the DC Rebirth era, which was also fantastic. In fact, I've really loved what I've read of that run, even more than his proper Batman run, but both are very fun reads, especially if you like Batman or the general Bat family. This, though, is that first arc, so this is a great starting point for new readers, and in my mind, actually the high point of the Tynion Batman era. I absolutely loved this story here, and I feel like more and more people need to talk about it. Perhaps when we get the Omnibus, I think that's slated to come out next year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe we'll get some more buzz about this run again, but I really like this story. For those that don't know, this is a Batman story, primarily, obviously, but it basically involves Batman battling a bunch of assassins within the DC universe. At first, we don't really know who's behind it all, and that's honestly one of the main points of intrigue, and it's just super action-packed as Batman's trying to deal with this really intense scenario of being hunted by all of these really prolific killers in this universe. Along the way, we also have a great flashback narrative that's done kind of in tandem with the present-day storyline. This flashback story really gathers a small group of Batman's most notable villains together, characters like the Penguin, the Riddler, the Joker, and Catwoman. That's right, this is at a time where Catwoman was still definitely a villain opposed to Batman, as opposed to now where she's more or less a love interest character or dabbles in that side of things. But anyway, we have this great kind of conspiracy as to what happened then, what were all those villains doing together, who were they meeting with, and how does that influence or really impact what's happening in the present. I love this storyline. I love the way the narrative was constructed and layered and put together. I think the characters involved are all fantastic, and the art from Guillem March just jumps off of every page. In fact, he is one of my favorite modern Batman illustrators. I just think the art here is absolutely jaw-dropping. I picked this collection because it is orange-ish on the spine with some of the lettering, but honestly, I didn't need much of an excuse to talk about this book again. I've definitely showcased it on the channel quite a few times, and even looking at it right now, I just remember how much I really love this story. I really hope, like I said, we get a whole branch of new readers as they collect the omnibus that maybe comes out in a year, or people see videos like this and decide, hey, I want to give it a shot. As I mentioned, it is fairly friendly to new readers, starting at the beginning of a new comic run, so I do think if you just want to check out a fun Batman story you may be overlooked or have missed out on, I highly recommend this book here, Batman, Their Dark Designs. Or if you want to see a full review, you can actually find that on my channel as well, because I did provide that review. And hey, while I have your attention, if you're enjoying this video and you'd like to see other comic book reviews, list videos, unboxings, things like that, and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. Thank you so much for considering. Now on with the show. Next up is one of the largest books in my collection. This is Dan Brereton's Nocturnals Omnibus Volume 1 from Dark Horse Comics. This is an oversized hardcover edition that's about the same standing height as my Geiger edition I recently read from Image Comics. This book was actually given to me by a friend of the channel, Tyler, over at Illuminerdy. Thanks again, Tyler. I am still admittedly making my way through this collection, but it's gigantic in orange, and it's definitely autumnal themed itself, so I had to throw it in the video today. For those that don't know, this is a collection of almost horror-themed vigilante characters that all assemble to make their own kind of vigilante or hero team. In many ways, it reminds me of an independent comic, kind of analog to something like a Justice League Dark, if you're familiar with that franchise, which gathers a lot of the kind of, again, dark fantasy sort of comic characters together. That's kind of what we have here, and the art from Brereton is absolutely captivating. Everything in here looks like a painted piece of art, and to have it in this oversized hardcover edition, it's just something really to marvel at. Now, this omnibus does include the first couple mini-series or kind of little runs in this, whole arc we have here from Brereton. We do have, I believe, 2 volumes for this that have currently been released. I'm unclear if that is the entirety of this Nocturnal series, but this is certainly a good-sized book, and especially if you like those gorgeous oversized hardcover editions, this is definitely one to check out. At the time of the recording, you can actually still find this book in print, and usually going for not that expensive. Again, I'm still making my way through it myself. I will say the actual dialogue is maybe, I don't want to say clunky, but I'm not as absorbed in it as I was maybe hoping to be, but the visuals more than make up for it in many cases, because the character models here, it's just really impressive. There is this really interesting dynamic quality to these characters, and I also just think the art style here is not one you see often in mainstream comics, even with publishers like Dark Horse. It has a really unique visual style, and even as I'm looking at it now, it's just really eye-catching. Now, admittedly, I do not have a full review of this on the channel yet. Again, I'm still making my way through it, but any readers of the Nocturnals, I would love to have your comments in the comments section. I'd love to get more feedback about this title. Is this one I need to put on my front burner again to try to get through? I would, again, just like more feedback or thoughts on this. I have not actually heard too much discussion about this work in general, so again, would love more feedback on that, especially from viewers like you who might have read Nocturnals and are a bit ahead of me or a couple pages ahead. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and go to our next entry. Rounding out our orange list today, I couldn't do it without talking about The Thing. And to showcase that amazing character from the Fantastic Four, we're going to be looking at The Thing Omnibus by John Byrne from Marvel Comics. This massive tome collects his first solo series, not including his appearances in, I believe, Marvel 2-in-1, which was also essentially a Thing series. No, this is his own self-titled run that began around the time of the John Byrne era Fantastic Four, actually. So this is a really fun companion piece if you're a fan of that Fantastic Four run. Maybe you've collected those omnibuses as well, or maybe you're a fan of the original Secret Wars miniseries that they did back in the day. There's Thing issues right in the middle of this omnibus, actually, that all take place directly after the Marvel superhero Secret Wars. The ending of that miniseries, without spoiling too much, heavily impacted the character of the Thing, and we get a lot of the kind of transformation for that character and what happened after the events of Secret Wars in this very omnibus. Reading this omnibus, it was my first opportunity to read many of the issues in here, and I for one had a blast. This was a really kind of zany, misadventure kind of series, and I actually felt like the book read almost like it had 2 or 3 distinct eras or parts in it. It's just such a massive book. I really enjoyed, though, like I said, the middle is really about post-Secret Wars happenings for the Thing, which actually felt like a science fiction kind of space epic. Everything before them were more slice of life, more personal Thing stories, which I also greatly liked, and everything at the end was kind of the Thing trying to find himself. I think he even becomes a pro wrestler. Again, a slight spoiler there, but this was a really fascinating book. I had a ton of fun with this omnibus. This is one that I don't hear people talk about enough. No, it maybe doesn't have the staying power as John Byrne's Fantastic Four run. I know a lot of people scrambled to get those omnibuses, but this is still a really good read. I actually think, like I said, it's a really fun companion omnibus if you have a bunch of other Fantastic Four related books and things at home. And if you're looking for an orange book this season, this is definitely a treat as well. One of my big selling points here was I like just getting inside the Thing as a character, getting to know a little bit more about what makes him tick. We had some fun flashbacks throughout this book, and we got to see a lot of real maturing and kind of character developing kind of moments as well. This book really made me care about this character in new ways, and it was just fun to read more from John Byrne in this era. He's definitely one of my favorite writers for this time period in the history of comics, and again, this was always one I wanted to check out, and when I had an opportunity to review it, I really just leapt at it. In fact, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the Thing, definitely make sure to check out the review video that's tagged in this very video. But that is The Thing Omnibus by John Byrne. This is another one that if you've read this run, I'd love to get comments on it. Not because I haven't read this one, just because I'd like to start a discussion. I think it's a really fun time period, and I'd love to talk more people about it. Okay, and with that, we're going to start landing the plane for 5 orange comic book collected editions. This has been a really fun list for me. Like I said, I wanted to do something a little more seasonal and themed, so I thought orange would be just kind of a fun way to do that without doing a straight up kind of Halloween or horror themed list video. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I also just thought it would be fun to get an eclectic grouping of my collections together, maybe showcase some books I don't often speak to in these videos. But let me know what you think. Have you read any of the titles I included here in the list? Do you have any other comic book recommendations you'd recommend that are orange, or maybe that you like to read around this time of year? Love to hear all that in the comments as well. If you liked how silly this prompt was and you'd like to see other color comic book spine videos, let me know that as well. I can't imagine there's too much demand for that, but I do like the way this looks, and I had a lot of fun putting it together. Thanks everyone for watching, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks again, and have a good one.